Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Name on the Trophy, your Manchester United podcast. And we're getting very excited for the start of the Premier League season. On today's episode, I'm Dominic Booth, joined as always by Alex Wiley. It's like Christmas Eve, Alex. Apart from it's the Premier League, not Christmas.
Yeah, it's the best part of the season because it's that point where anything could happen.
Yeah, anything is possible. And on today's podcast, we're going to talk about um, what we consider to be United's main rivals in the top four, top six, however you want to put it. Assess their transfer business and predict where we think they will finish and where we think United will finish, and a little bit of insight behind why we think that and how they're shaping up, basically. So, an interesting task for us, I think, considering the business at all the other clubs as well as United, because we haven't really talked about other clubs yet. What they have done in terms of the summer window, have we?
No, and obviously we've kept on top of all the signings as they're happening, but it's only after sitting down to do this podcast where you actually look where those signings fit into the actual squads and where the holes still remain, that you appreciate that quite a lot of our competitors aren't quite up to scratch yet. And it was only after sitting down and prepping for this that I came to that realization. So I think it's going to be interesting to talk about that.
Yeah, I came to the same thought actually. Just looking at some of the signings, I think two clubs are in fantastic shape, and I think the rest. So we're looking at Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs, and Newcastle are the ones that we're focusing on. We expect that to be the top seven. With all due respect to Aston Villa, probably, who will probably be the ones who think they can barge down the door and get into that this season, considering the squad they have. But we'll talk about those. What about Man City, Alex, to start with? Obviously, probably the most boring club to talk about. And I don't just say that because I'm a Manchester United fan, just because they don't seem to get anything wrong. And that makes them infinitely less interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, it's I go back to the documentary on City when they won the league, and it was so dull because there was so little at stake. There was no conflict. It was just a team walking to the league. And it felt a bit
Yeah.
like that looking at their transfer business. They've not done a huge amount. Obviously, Gvardiol is, I think, the most expensive defender in the Premier League now. A very good player, a player I like a lot. Brings in another left-sided centre back for them alongside Laporte. So I think I heard rumours could be going, but I'm not 100% sure. And other than that, really, the other pros for them, I think, are keeping hold of Kyle Walker in the face of Bayern Munich interest and keeping hold of Bernardo Silva in the face of PSG interest. I think those are big wins for them. The only real cons, or the only con I could think of, was that they've lost Riyad Mahrez, who, to be fair, was, I think, in his 30s, and they got a good fee for him, but haven't replaced him as such with an actual signing. But I guess the counter argument to that is they've got Phil Foden, who's ready to get more minutes. And also, as you saw in the Community Shield, Cole Palmer could be the season where he breaks through. But that was the only obvious con I could think to their window.
Yeah, I've seen City linked with Michael Elise and Matoma of Brighton as potential replacements for Mahrez. And I know that second one pricks your interest as a huge champion of Karim Matoma back in the days when no one knew who he was. So
Yes.
kudos for you on that one. Kovacic is the other one that we haven't mentioned. We mentioned obviously both Guardiola and Kovacic on previous podcasts as potential United targets, and it's interesting that both have been snapped up by City. I mean, the quality of neither player is a secret on the world stage. I think Guardiola's sort of the coming force in terms of a youngish centre back, especially a left footer, like you say.
Mm.
And Kovacic just brings that sort of gnarled experience, direct replacement for Ilkay Gundogan, who's gone. I don't think you could have got a better replacement for Gundogan. He's 29, but he's just ready made to start a whole heap of games in that City midfield and do a very fine job, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's what's so enviable about the way that City run. They had Gundogan, one of their key players, leaving in the window, and within less than a month, they already had his replacement through the door. It's just something at United. I think we will hopefully get more used to it, but we haven't seen that for the best part of 10 years, that sort of forward planning. One other thing, I guess, to point out, going back to the winger situation, is they've only got one winger who's actually right-footed, and that's Jack Grealish. And I know Guardiola, he's similar to Ten Hag. He likes his wingers to cut in. He likes them to hug the touchline as well, but he's also quite keen on them cutting in. Mahrez from the right with his left foot, Grealish with his right foot from the left. So they are somewhat understaffed in that department, but that is really the only weakness I could find looking through. And
Yeah,
it's not a
you
big
think
one.
if they go in for one more player before the window closes, it probably would be a winger. But
Mm.
then I've seen them linked with Lucas Paquetá of West Ham, so I don't know
Mm.
quite how that fits in. It's just like classic Pep of just sign good players who play in a certain way and then mold the system around that. I mean, he seems to have a whole heap of centre backs at the moment, but some of them will probably play in fullback positions. Some of them will play in midfield, like John Stones has done. Um, he hasn't really signed a left back for a few years now, but it hasn't seemed to matter. He just hasn't found one that he likes, so therefore he's fit other players into that position. Ake, Laporte, I guess Guardiola will probably play there at some
Yeah.
point. It's a very fluid approach, but also a very sort of calm and composed approach that City take in the transfer window, and they don't seem to panic. But they just get the players they want, and then stay out of other deals that might get a bit complicated, like the Declan Rice one, for example. This summer they just didn't want to take part in that. As soon as the price got above a certain amount, I think 100 million, they said too much.
Mm. And I agree with them. I'm sure we'll talk about it with Arsenal, but I think that was far too much for Declan Rice. Yeah, look, with City, you've just won the treble. You don't need to change anything drastically. It's just about managing squad turnover in Gundogan, Riyad Mahrez. You don't need to change anything too much. I don't think Pep fully trusts Laporte, and he's the only left-footed centre back. Bar actually, I think Nathan Ake might be
Ake is
left-footed.
left-footed as well, yeah, but
Yeah,
he
Ake's
sort of plays wherever Pep tells him to. Really, he
yeah,
doesn't play centre back a lot of the time.
yeah, and I think with Gvardiol, obviously he fits in at that left centre back, but he also can play left back. He has done in the past, and he's one of the best left-footed young centre backs at progressing the ball forward, not only with his passing but also with his running. I think he'll look very, very good straight from the off. So yeah, I've got no worries about City. I'm just worried about how good they're going to be.
So, what's your grade for their business, and what's your prediction for where you think they'll finish? I think both are probably fairly obvious.
Well, so for the window, because it's been fairly non-eventful, I gave it a B, which might be harsh. I was umming and ahhing between an A or a B. It's just when there aren't that many marquee signings. Well, I guess there's one marquee signing, but when there's not a lot of them, it's hard to be like, oh, it's a brilliant window. But to be honest, it's a good window. So it'd be a B or an A. And obviously, I think they're going to finish first. And it's also worth pointing out, I've got sort of two lists. I've got a list that I made intuitively of where I think teams will finish. And I've also got a list from the betting companies, basically aggregated of what they're going to predict and where they think clubs are going to finish. So my intuitive list was City first, obviously. And obviously the betting market agrees with that.
Yeah, no, I can't say anything other than I agree with both of those. I think City will finish first, barring something miraculous. But as we said at the top of the podcast, that's why the start of the season is so great, because you can think all those miraculous things might happen.
Yeah.
It's only when you get to February, March, April where they don't happen and it all turns back to reality. But yeah, City to finish first and solid transfer business, maybe a B plus if we're being more
Yeah.
granular. Arsenal then
Mm-hmm.
made possibly the biggest moves of any club in the Premier League in terms of money and maybe surprising moves as well. I think attracting Rice, to me, it was a surprise. I expected him to go to City actually before the window started. And obviously, Kai Havertz and Jurriën Timber, another two players who we mentioned on the podcast actually in the recent past in relation to United. 60 million for Havertz and 38 million for Timber from Ajax, who is sort of versatile defender, centre back who can play at full back. What do you make of this business? There's some eyebrows raised at the Rice and Havertz deals from around the footballing world.
Yeah, as I said at the start, I think I like Rice. He's obviously got a lot of experience in the Premier League. He's still young. From what I've heard, his character is like captain material. I still think, given his skill set on the pitch, 100+ million is, for me, a huge overpayment, like a ginormous overpayment for what you're getting. That being said, I think they've added depth and they needed that. You saw that at the tail end of last season that they needed to add more players to come in when the others were injured. So they've added depth and they've added quality. And I really like Jurriën Timber. I think that right-sided, so they got their right fullback who's also sort of a centre back in Tomiyasu/Ben White, who plays like quite a unique role in and out of possession. I'd actually argue Jurriën Timber is one of the best signings they could have made for that position, because I think that's where he'll play. Even though he played left back in the Community Shield, I imagine that's where he's going to play. So I think Jurriën Timber for me is a big tick. And Kai Havertz, I think they've slightly overpaid for him. But as I said on the Chelsea podcast a few months ago, I really rate Kai Havertz. I just don't 100% know where he fits in to this Arsenal team. I'm not sure if they're envisioning him being in that sort of Odegaard position or being up front or being a winger. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's all three and he's just going to fit in if and where he needs to. But honestly, I think it's been a good window for a team that is already on the up.
Yeah, I do agree. And although we bickered about Havertz on that previous podcast where I didn't want him anywhere near United and you did, and then he's ended up moving to the team who finished second and challenged for the league last season. That's probably a win for you on that one. I do like the signing because I think it brings them options, like you say. But what is interesting is that I think Gabriel Jesus is now injured, and so Kai Havertz is probably going to start the season as Arsenal's number 9, which is the role that many have questioned his capability to play in based on his spell at Chelsea, missing a lot of chances. He just doesn't look comfortable in that role to me. I don't think he is a number 9. He is probably going to start the season there. But then last season, Arsenal dropped off quite a bit when Jesus was out. That was one of the reasons why they dropped off in the title race. So they were sort of trying to replace him. And Ketia came in. I know he scored a couple against United in that game, but didn't sort of provide the real depth of goals that they're looking for. So it's an interesting one. I think Arsenal will drop off slightly from last year, but not. I think the signings mean that won't be too great a drop off. I think that they've got quality, and last year they overperformed where they should have been. I don't think there's any doubt in that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. That being said, I think they still were clearly the second best team in the league. For me, it should have been like third and fourth, quite far away. United and can't even Newcastle should have been a bit further away. And then there should have been a bit of a gap, Arsenal, and then there should have been a bit more of a gap, and City. It shouldn't have been as close, the Arsenal and City title race, as it was, given how good both teams were, in my opinion. So I could see Arsenal not being in a title race, but still being more or less the same quality they were last year. And people might perceive that as a drop off. But I think last year was a little funny, small sample sizes and all that, where City still looked really good, but they weren't quite getting the points at the start of the season. And
Yeah.
Arsenal looked good, but didn't look quite that good to be getting as many points as they did. And that led to a title race. You never know with a Premier League season, certain things can go your way. But I can see Arsenal, I do see Arsenal finishing second again and probably just not being as close to the top as they were last season.
Yeah, so I have Arsenal third in my predictions. I
Mm-hmm.
think they'll still be good. I don't think they'll be in a title race. I think the Champions League commitments will complicate things for Arteta because he liked an incredibly settled side last season. He barely made any changes, only when they were enforced due to
Mm-hmm.
injury. And that's going to be a challenge for him this year. I mean, they potentially have that extra bit of depth with Rice and Havertz and Timber, but it's not a huge amount. They have lost Xhaka, who actually massively massively overperformed. I think last season was a massive part of their success, sort of against people's expectations of him. I think, yeah, Arsenal third, and I do rate their business as B.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that's holding it back is how much they've spent. I think if they spent a little bit less on the same three players, then it's A plus material.
That's more or less where I was with it. I thought I gave them a B as well. Um, Good deals. They've just overspent. And just to go back to what the betting market has Arsenal at, it also has Arsenal at second. So I think we can say between us two and the betting market, second and third seems about right.
Yeah, well, I'm going more off instinct, and you're going more off data, which is nothing new on this podcast. But
No, no. But I would like to say that my list of where I thought initially that was, I say intuitive, obviously in the back of my head, I've got all the numbers whirring away, but that's about as intuitive as I can be. And obviously the betting market is the more quantitative uh list. But to be fair, they were very closely aligned by one team.
I'm not having you claiming that you're more intuitive than anything, really. I think you're online with the data almost all the time. That's absolutely fine. People expect that.
Yeah, it's part of the brand, but I do try. I want to disagree with the data sometimes because the data fundamentally is not always going to be correct. I think if you were to do a little test, it would be more correct than intuition. I do believe that, but I also think that intuition picks up on things that data never can. So I want to be wrong sometimes. When I'm not, it's kind of a catch-22.
Well, do you want to be wrong on the next team? I suspect you probably do want to be wrong because it's Liverpool. As United fans, we always want them to underperform what they should do. Um, it's been a really interesting summer for. Well, it's sort of been an underwhelming summer for Liverpool. Really, they're still searching around for that number 6 defensive midfield signing, and they've only got 2 players through the door. I know that they signed Gakpo last January, and they did sign a few players in the sort of last year or two to help cope with the turnover of their squad. Departures of people like Firmino, obviously Milner, and then Henderson and Fabinho have been the big ones recently to the Saudi Pro League. But they seem to have lost far more than they've gained this window. And I know a couple of Liverpool fans who are a little bit concerned that they haven't had a better window.
Mm. Yeah, I mean Liverpool, they're is a strange one to try and analyze because last season, if you're looking at expected goals for and against, expected goal difference, they were fifth in the league. So apparently it was City, then Newcastle, believe it or not, then Arsenal, Brighton, then Liverpool, then United. I think they hugely underperformed last season relative to actually how well they played and what they were capable of. So all things being equal, let's just say they didn't bring anyone in or out. I would expect them to do better this season than they did last season, just by pure regression to the mean. Their actual window itself, I don't think it's a bad window. I think Alexis McAllister they got for a good amount of money. He's a good age, Premier League proven, good player. Szoboszlai. Always struggle with that.
Shabozlai. Yeah, I
Szoboszlai.
was avoiding saying that, to be honest.
Yeah,
Dominic.
he Dominic Szoboszlai. There we go. He is a very good footballer. He has he likes to shoot from distance a bit too often for my liking, but technically very good. Fits in quite nicely because you can play as a centre mid or sort of like a number 8 position or the wide position, so he fits into their team quite nicely. But as you alluded to at the start, or said at the start, defensive midfield is a problem. I don't think the higher ups banked on Fabinho leaving this window. I think he was still going to be their designated number 6. They've obviously let him go, and they've let him go for a good amount of money, but they haven't filled that gap at all, really. I mean, they've got Bacetic, who he's still 18. From my data about him, so our Sabre score has him as a 75, which is slightly below average for a Premier League centre midfielder. He's obviously got a lot of potential. He's only 18 years old, but it doesn't suggest he's going to be the starting number 6 at Liverpool. And I don't think McAllister should really be playing there. I don't think that's what he's best at. I think you're looking at the rest of the team. Curtis Jones isn't a number 6. Thiago could play there, but I don't think he's got the legs to do defensive work anymore. He'd be great on the ball, but it's just off the ball there'd be big concerns. So unless they bring in the number 6, I think they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I think that loss of Fabinho is absolutely massive and hasn't actually been talked about enough by journalists and pundits, because the role that he played, especially when they won the league a few years ago, when he was at his very best, I know he probably has slightly peaked, and he's gone to the Saudi Pro League, which maybe says something about how he is. But he's 29. he's not, he's not over the hill. He shouldn't be over the hill. And I think he had a few more good years at Liverpool left in him. So I was really surprised to see them let him go. I know 40 million, like you say, is a decent amount of money. And I think Romeo Lavia from Southampton is the player that Liverpool want to replace him. Maybe if they get him, the picture changes a little bit. I think over-reliance on Mo Salah will continue to be a theme for Liverpool. How far he is past that peak. I think he keeps pulling out ridiculous return Salah, doesn't he? And almost carrying Liverpool on his back for the last couple of years. But he's 31 now. So, yeah, I don't know. I found Liverpool the hardest team of this group to actually predict, because I know what they're capable of at their best. They're very close to City at their best a couple of years ago, but we haven't really seen that. And it could be one of those seasons where it all just falls apart and you see huge sweeping changes, even Klopp going or something like that. So I rate their window a D. That's probably a bit harsher than you, maybe. I think I do agree that McAllister's a good signing, but I don't know anything about Szoboszlai. How you're supposed to say it? That was terrible pronunciation.
Definitely wrong.
Szoboszlai.
Szoboszlai.
I don't know enough about him to know whether he's going to tear the league up or not. I know that his stats are good. But he comes into a midfield which is a little bit fragmented. So Liverpool, I rate a D in terms of business, and I'm predicting that they're going to finish 5th.
Okay. We're not too far apart. I've gone for a C for their window. Like I said before, they've added a bit of depth in those sort of number 8 positions after losing Dean Henderson. Obviously, Fabio Carvalho has gone out on loan as well. Naby Keita's gone. So they've done well to replace that. I thought they actually did quite well to get some money on Jordan Henderson, given how long was left of his contract and his age. In terms of where they're going to finish, I had them down as 4th. So I think they'll sneak into the Champions League places. The market, funnily enough, actually has them as 3rd, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I thought they'd have them lower. I think a lot of it is an assumption that they will regress to the mean somewhat, but I think their squad is maybe not quite as good as it was last year. I think losing Roberto Firmino might hurt them in the long run. And like you said, Salah, you do notice with footballers, when they drop off, it's steep. it's not a gradual, especially with attackers. He's sort of Ronaldo,
Yeah,
sort of gets to a point and then it does drop off pretty quick. Their body just can't deal with the load anymore. They get injured a lot. And I know Salah takes great care of himself, but I think that is somewhat precarious. Now, look, they've loaded their attacking line with a lot of young players who still should have quite a lot of upside. And there's a good chance that one of them really take off next
yeah.
year and that carries them into the Champions League spaces. So I don't know. But I agree with you. I think bar maybe Chelsea is probably the hardest one I found to grade.
Yeah, Chelsea's always going to be hard given what they've been through the last year. It'll be interesting when we come on to
Chaos.
them next, actually. But yeah, I think Darwin Núñez, Cody Gakpo, Luis Diaz, they're exciting players, but none of them are particularly proven yet in the Premier League and with Liverpool. One of them may have a 20, 25 goal season in them. Who knows? I certainly think Darwin Núñez could manage that based
Mm.
on the promise that he showed last year, despite a whole flurry of critics coming his way. I actually think every time I've seen him, he looks a very dangerous player, just a little bit chaotic and sort of unorthodox sometimes in his approach, which I think Captain Chaos, I think Jamie Carragher called him, didn't he? I think that is exactly it. But if he can manage that chaos, he's a perfect Jurgen Klopp Liverpool forward, isn't he? So I think that'll be really interesting. He's going to go in my fantasy team actually this year, Darwin Núñez.
Yeah, I think that's a good chat. When I was talking before about intuition and data, when you watch Darwin Nunez, it's so easy to think he's a bad footballer because he's chaotic, he's clumsy, sometimes his touches aren't great. But if you actually just look at the numbers, his expected goals last season was second highest in the league, I believe, after Erling Haaland's. It was 0.73. I'm looking at it right now. It's in the top 2% for strikers in the European leagues. He had nearly 5 shots a game. That's the top 1%. His expected assisted goals was in the top 7%. And his combined expected goals and assists, top 1%. I mean, I know he is chaotic and he's clumsy, and I imagine for Liverpool fans he's very frustrating. But there is the potential to be an absolutely phenomenal, borderline world class player there, and he's one of those guys. He's probably the guy I bet on the most that could really just suddenly take off and get you, like you said, 20, 30 goals a season.
Yeah, interesting one. Yeah, the evolution
Mm,
of Darwin is going to be the theme of the season.
very good.
On to Chelsea then. Another hard team to predict, another team that's seen a heck of a lot of change over the summer and over the last year. Obviously, Mauricio Pochettino is now installed as manager. They've signed a few players this summer, not as many as last summer or in January. It would have been hard to do that. And they let quite a few go as well. I mean, let's just go through the players that they could let go. This is harking back to our Chelsea podcast a while ago. I think we probably mentioned all of these: Havertz, Mount, Kovacic, Koulibaly, Pulisic, Mendy, Loftus-Cheek, Aubameyang, Kante, Azpilicueta. They're all Bakayoko, if you can count him as well. They're all players who have left this summer. All players that I don't know if all of them needed to go, but a lot of them probably needed to be shipped off given their wages and just the need to balance the books with FFP. What do you make of the players they brought in, though, Alex? I know Nicholas Jackson is one that you really like, and Kunku, Axel Disasi from Monaco. What do you think?
If we were to isolate each of these signings and I was to talk about them in isolation, I'd be happy with almost all of them. And Kunku is one of the best young strikers in world football and has been for quite a few years. Nicholas Jackson's had an absolutely fantastic season in La Liga, which through the data is the second hardest league to score in, and he's had a very, very good goal scoring season in that league. He's a bit more of a gamble because he's only really had 1 year of football, so I'd say the confidence intervals are bigger for that one. Disasi, I'm not quite so keen. I know United liked him. I think he's a good player, and I do think with centre backs, you need to pull away from the data a bit more and more watch players. But Disasi, I think, is probably the one I'm not quite so keen on. Levi Colwill, who they managed to keep, I think is a real big win for them and a big plus because he's a great player. And even Ugo Chukwu, who's the young defensive midfielder they've signed, he's one of the players that our model rates as a wonder kid, and I've liked for quite a long time. So in isolation, I would rate almost all these deals either an A or a B. But in totality, it's just too much player trading. There's too much instability to build a team around. And I think the owners still don't appreciate that footballers are not stocks. This is not an investment fund in the traditional sense that they're used to managing. These are human beings that need to like get to know each other and build a cohesive unit and learn how to play with one another. You can't just bring in and out 10 players every single window and expect it to work. And I know you said at the start it's been a quieter window, but it's still quieter, but it's still extremely busy when you actually look at just the number of players they've brought in and out. It's far too much instability for me. And even though I like I said before, a lot of the deals they make, if you're going to continue to be this chaotic, it's not going to work. I said it when they first did it. I didn't think it would work, and I'm more bullish now that they need to just pull back a little bit.
Yeah, well, you say stocks and trades, but the way that they have managed the situation and with huge player turnaround, they've lost money on players. You know, Pulisic joined for 58 million a few years ago from Dortmund. They've let him go for 17 million to Milan. Koulibaly, they brought him in for 1 year. I think he earned £8 million in that year. He cost 33 million, and they've sold him for 20. So that's a big loss on a player in 1 year. So it isn't smart business either. It's, you know, let alone thinking about the football side, it isn't good business. They're losing money. Financial fair play, you know, is a big worry for Chelsea. And now they've got a new manager who I rate enormously. I think Pochettino is a fantastic manager. I would have happily had him at United, despite all the calls that people didn't want him at United after his PSG spell. I thought he was actually judged quite harshly for his PSG spell. But has Pochettino got the tools there for Chelsea to compete? I've got no idea. I've got absolutely no idea how good Chelsea are going to be. I've got a sneaking suspicion they might be quite good because I think they've got a very good manager and the raw materials are all there. I think they might start the season slowly, but they might eventually come good.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree that as the season wears on, they'll get better and better. But if you look at the team, it's full of brilliant footballers, but there's still areas of the pitch that they're surprisingly weak in. When you look at centre midfield, okay, they've got Enzo Fernandez, who I spoke about before, as being, I think, one of the better midfielders in the world. But other than that, they haven't got a huge amount of just centre midfielders. I mean, the only other centre midfielder they've got who's older than 22 is Conor Gallagher, and he's 23. The other centre midfielders are Andre Santos, 19, Ugo Chukwu, I spoke about before, 19. I don't think ready to play first team for Chelsea just yet. Needs another loan deal. Then they've got Casadei, who I think is going on loan. He's 20. Other midfielders are in their teens. And they've also got 7 centre backs. And from memory, I don't remember Pochettino ever playing with a back 3. So I don't know how 7 goes into 2 without being a big problem. So it's still not. It's just not fully thought through. Well. It's still imbalanced, even though there's loads of great footballers there. So I still think this is going to be a season in which Chelsea aren't quite at the races. But I appreciate this. This is the one where I could be the most wrong on because, as I spoke about 20 minutes ago, this is the one I found the hardest.
So what have you gone for in terms of the grade and the prediction?
So I gave their window a D, which
okay, I would say better than a D. I would say probably a C, but that's just purely hedging my bets completely because I don't know if they've had a good one or not.
Yeah, I thought they did well. They made a lot of money on sales. I know they made a loss on some of the players. I guess they'll argue that they didn't actually buy the quote unquote stock, but they have made, 250 million, quarter of a billion on player sales is fairly impressive. And in terms of where I think they'll finish in the league, I thought 5th, and the betting market agreed with me and also had them down as 5th.
Okay, I've said 4th, purely because of that ceiling that I think they have got, and the manager they've got, if they give him time, if the players come good, and both of those are probably the biggest ifs in the Premier League at the moment, given it's Chelsea. But we'll see. I think they're a really, really interesting team to watch this season. I'm looking forward to seeing who the hell lines up for them to start with, and how they perform when they actually do play. I think they're playing Liverpool first up, so that's going to be a huge test. I do not expect them to win that game to start with, but if they do, they could, create some momentum rather sharpish. Let's go on to Spurs, Alex, who had an absolute shocking season last season. Another team with a huge manager turnover. They sacked a manager and then sacked his caretaker. Finished the season with Ryan Mason in charge and stumbled to 8th place finish, I think it was. But they seem to have got their ideas in order a little bit with the appointment of Ange Postecoglou, which I think is a good appointment as manager, former Celtic manager. And they've signed a few players who I don't think are completely top bracket players, like we've been talking about with some of the other clubs. I think they are players for the future and improving players. And I think it will be a sort of season of transition for Tottenham, whether or not they keep hold of Harry Kane, which is obviously the $1 million question around Spurs. I kind of don't think that matters. I think either way, they will be a side looking to push towards the top 4, but they won't get in it. That's the way I see it.
I'd agree with that. If I was using last season as a basis for predicting this season, look, they had a bad season. Their numbers didn't suggest they should have had a better one. So it's quite a low, it's quite a low rung on the ladder to begin with. I don't dislike their deals. I think they've signed players at the right age. There's a lot of players with upside. They haven't spent crazy money on any of these players either, so I think that's quite good. They managed to get around 10 million for Harry Winks, which I think is not too bad either. My biggest concern, or I guess I have two concerns with Tottenham. They're going from playing a back 3 to going back to just 2 centre backs. And I think that needs different personnel, and there's a transition involved. And the second side of it is they now need more traditional wingers, which they didn't have before. They had sort of inside, I don't know what you call it, inside, well, either 10s or inside wingers. I don't know what you want to call them, but that's what they had. And their squad is remarkably short on out and out wingers. And Postecoglou likes wingers. He likes people that get out wide. He likes to attack down that part of the pitch. I am a little concerned with, Solomon is a guy who in the past has been a wonder kid on our app. I like him. Whether he's ready to make this bigger step up, I'm not 100% sure. Heung-min Son, where's he going to play? I don't know. I think they still need to bring in at least one more winger. And as you said, the Harry Kane issue, if they lose Harry Kane, I think they'll really, really struggle. So they're actually, out of all the teams that we're going to talk about, I have them as finishing the lowest. So I have them as finishing 7th. The market agrees, also has them finishing 7th. And grading the window itself, I initially put down a D, but I think on reflection, I'd push it up to a C. I don't think it's been a terrible window yet.
Yeah, you see, I think it would be a C, and I actually think it would be a B if they sold Harry Kane. And that seems completely counterintuitive. But I think, and a lot of people have said this, it's not an outlandish viewpoint at all, that they just should sell Harry Kane and move on to a new era, use the funds to reinvest in other areas of the squad. Like you say, if they need another winger, they obviously would need a striker to replace Kane. I'm not sure about their goalkeeping situation. I know they've signed Vicario from Empoli. Is he the new number 1? I don't know. There's a few question marks that I think would be answered if they sold Kane and used those funds wisely. In a situation not dissimilar to when they sold Gareth Bale all those years ago and bought loads of players, about 7 or 8 players with that money. I know they got a lot wrong with those 7 or 8 players, but it did actually precipitate the most successful period that Spurs have had in the last 50 years when Pochettino
Yeah.
came in and got it right with a lot of those players like Ericsson and Lamella and people like that. So yeah, I like Maddison as a signing for 40 million. I think that's a great deal. I think he suits them really well. I'm looking forward to seeing him play for Spurs. Van der Ven, I've heard really good things about as a left-sided centre back,
Mhm.
and they've made the Kulusevski deal permanent. I like that as well. So yeah, I'll give them a C plus, I think, at the moment. But I do think they will finish seventh. Having said all of that, I think they're
Yeah.
just too much in transition to think that they'll challenge towards the top end.
Yeah. It's the first one I've done where the window doesn't quite, like how I graded the window doesn't quite match what I think their season's going to be. But I
They're
think
coming
that's
from
just
such a
because
low point, aren't they? That's
exactly,
the problem.
exactly.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
came eighth last year, and Chelsea finished below them. So
Yeah.
that says a heck of a lot about how far they need to catch up.
Yeah. I think selling Harry Kane is the right thing to do in the long term. I think if they sold him this window, they would suffer this season. I don't think. I mean, how long we got left until the end of the window? 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Got 3 weeks until the end of the window. They probably would need to bring in another striker. I don't think Richarlison's quite good enough to rely on for a team that wants to be pushing for Champions League spots. And even so, that would still leave them a little limited. I also, as much as I like Kulusevski and James Maddison, I don't 100% know how they'll fit into the way that Postecoglou likes to play because they're kind of wingers. I mean, Madison's kind of a 10. I don't know if they're going to be playing in those centre midfielder spots or they're going to be playing out wide. There's a lot of sort of ifs and buts with this team, and it mostly comes from the fact that they've been bringing in managers that don't suit the same style of football, and so their squad's just a bit all over the shop. And I don't know how you go from Conte to Postecoglou. They have completely different ideas of the game, completely different ways of approaching it, and I think there will be teething problems as a result of that. So I think they'll be good. I don't think I think Postecoglou is a good manager, and I hope he does well because I like him. But I still think this will be a season of transition.
yeah, absolutely. What about Newcastle then? Final team, apart from United. We'll do a little bit on United at the end, but we do spend a lot of our time in this podcast talking about United. So let's talk about Newcastle. Tonali from Milan, Harvey Barnes from Leicester, Tino Livramento as their main signings. I think is it Yankuba Minte as well from Odense, who's a sort of a teenager who's going to get loaned out. But the main three signings there, I kind of think they're all good. I think that Newcastle are continuing to be quite sensible despite having a whole heap of money to play with, and they could go crazy. They're doing slightly quieter operations in the transfer market than you might expect.
I think the reason for that is FFP. And the reason I say that is because Alan St. Maximin was sold, and according to Eddie Howe specifically, so they could meet the FFP requirement. So I think that's the reason they haven't splurged as much as they'd like to. I think if this was 10 years ago, this would have been a far, far busier window for Newcastle.
Yeah.
With the signings they're bringing in, I think Harvey Barnes is very good. I really like Harvey Barnes. Whether he's an upgrade on St. Maximin, I'm not sure if he is.
So
I,
different. They're so different.
yeah, and I
Ivan's a
do.
lot more functional.
Yes, but I also think that what you can get out of St. Maximin is, I think there's a higher ceiling there. And I thought there was a bigger age gap between the two, but there's not really because Harvey Barnes, I mean, he was in the academy when I worked at Leicester. So in my mind's eye, he's always young, but he's actually, I think, 25 now. I don't think he's a
People
quote.
get older, Alex. I'm afraid.
I know he's
Afraid
not
to
he's
tell
not
you.
a young player anymore. And St. Maximin's 26. There's not a huge difference. So I think with that, I'm not sure if you've actually got slightly worse. Livramento, I like, but is surely going to be a backup to Trippier for at least a year or two. And Tonali's the only one who I guess, well, I guess you could say is an upgrade. But, and I might say something slightly controversial here, I think Sandro Tonali is one of the most overrated footballers on the planet.
I was
And
waiting
I've
for
said
this.
that I've said that for years. When I
He's a bit of a
watch him,
football manager's
yeah,
dream, isn't he? He was a big deal on that as a wonder kid a few years ago. But
yeah, and
I
I've
remember
I've
him
had
being talked about a heck of a lot, but I haven't actually
it.
seen that much of him.
Yes, there's been like I've had conversations with. So there was a guy who worked. He sort of works in Greece slash Italy, and we were doing scout reports, and ours wasn't very favourable of Tonali. And this is about 3 years ago. Is when it was at Brescia, I think. So it was a long time ago, and he had a real problem with that. He had a problem with data in general, but he had a problem with that because he said this guy is going to be one of the best footballers in the world. How can you say he's not going to be very good? And I guess to some extent he's been proven correct because he went on to play for AC Milan. But if you look at his numbers, so he quite often gets likened to Pirlo. And I think that's because he looks a bit like Pirlo and he plays in similar positions to Pirlo. But he's nothing like Pirlo in the way that he plays. So he doesn't really get on the ball that much. He's like average for how often he gets on the ball. His pass completion is in the bottom 10% for centre midfielders in world football. His progressive passes, you'd like to think, okay, well, at least he's trying like certain progressive passes. That's in the bottom 45%. So there's nothing outstanding there. The only thing that really stands out on his numbers are his assist numbers. Like he assists 1 in 5 games, which is very good. So I'll give him that. But I look at that data profile and like defensively doesn't do that much either. And I do think, is that a 60 million pound footballer? Like I just don't think it is. And I'm very, very interested to see how he does, because this could be an instance where the numbers are wrong and I need to shut up and take that. Or it's yet another instance of the numbers being right and I can gloat about it endlessly. We'll see.
Yeah, they're not always right. You
I
have
know.
hits and misses.
Yes.
What is interesting is that he just seems to be on the precipice of something. So if he shines now at the age of 23 with a an upperly mobile club like Newcastle, then we might be talking about him in that top bracket. He's going into a pretty good midfield, next to Bruno Guimaraes. I think that will help him. Anyone playing next to Bruno Guimaraes,
Mm.
is going to be benefited. I just don't know, like you say, I just don't know whether he sort of turns Newcastle into something else. Does he take them to that next level that they're looking for? I don't think so. No, I don't
Mm.
think so. Whether the stats say he does or not, and maybe that's where Newcastle have been hampered a little bit, like you say, by FFP and by what they're able to do. And in another world, they would have gone even bigger this window and taken that next step. Having finished in the top four, they've got Champions League football. Is that squad really ready to take on the challenge of Champions League football and mount another top four push in the Premier League
Mm.
under a kind of untested manager in that regard, and Eddie Howe? As much as I think Eddie Howe is a good, if not great manager, there's a lot of question marks over Newcastle. A lot of question marks.
Yeah.
I saw them a heck of a lot last season. It seemed every time I turned on Sky Sports last season, it seemed to be Newcastle that was on. I think the Sky Sports had a love affair with showing them,
Right.
and they didn't dominate a lot of games. They didn't seem to boss teams. They seemed to win games and stifle teams. They had an excellent defensive record.
Yeah.
They were a hugely hard-working side, but they never sort of dazzled and played teams off the park. The only time they did was against United at St James's, actually late in the season, that 2-0. But the reverse happened in the Carabao Cup. United played them off the park. So yeah, interesting. I have them down as sixth, purely because I think they're
Yeah.
probably better than Spurs. But I
Yeah.
don't
I,
I don't think other than that they're going to be hugely special. Click that up and put it out in May when they come second or third.
yeah. I mean, you can clip me up as well because I agree. I think I had them down as sixth. Betting market has them down as sixth. And I think you make a good point about Champions League football. It's not really something I thought about, but that is going to add a lot of stress onto that team. And one thing I did notice is they don't have many centre backs. They got Sven Botman, who I like, Fabian Schär, who I don't dislike, but he was part of a very good defense last season, so I can't take that away from him. Lascelles, and then after that, I mean, Dan Burn is more of a left back, really. He can play centre back. That's all they've got. And I think one big injury to one of those players, especially Sven Botman, and the linchpin of last season, the key thing that kept them as high as they were was their defence. And if that falls or that drops a level, I think they'll suffer. So I think it's reasonable to expect them to drop off a little bit this season, but still be good.
Yeah, and how'd you rate their window? I think it's a C. I think it's quietly okay without being stunning.
I gave them a D, and that's probably my Tonali bias coming to the fore. But I just think that spending that sort of money on a player like that is it's difficult to, and then that's your key signing because of obviously FFP restrictions. So yeah, I'm sure this will all get clipped up, and I'll look like an idiot. But yeah, I gave it a D.
The anti-Tonali bias is real. Yeah, okay, so that means there's one place left in our top 7 predictions, and that is for Manchester United. It's obvious where we both put them. I've gone a little bit more optimistic than you, and I've gone for second, and you've gone for third, which would be a continuation of last season for you. So you're not saying that United are going to improve on last season. Interesting.
Well, my basis for that was that United, I think, overperformed last season based on, yes, the data, but also watching them. I didn't think we were the clearly third best team in the league. Our expected goal difference had us down as the 6th best team in the league, believe it or not. I think we were better than that. I would have had us around 4th-ish. And I think whilst our window's been good and I think it will raise our level, we now also have Champions League football, which I guess is technically less football, but it's also more high stakes football that could have a negative effect. I'm just more or less the main thing I'm waiting is where I actually think we were last season and where I think we're going to get to. So I think we have improved. I just don't see us improving to the point in which we're better than Arsenal and certainly not better than City. And of course, I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong. In a conversation with friends the other day, I had us down as second, but it was only after sitting down and sort of bringing myself back to earth. I thought third's a bit more reasonable.
Is that a bullish beer fueled prediction with friends?
Yeah, I'd love a title challenge, and it's a good team. But the truth is, every team we've spoke about is good. There's no duds. So
yeah.
As much as I think our team's good, all the other teams are also really good. So yeah, we'll see. I've got them down as third, but I really, really hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I've also said second. I just think that last season, there's a few things with the goal difference last season. So United lost 4-0 to Brentford and 7-0 to Liverpool, which I think were both freakish results. And, opposition fans will laugh, but I think you can sort of take them out of the data in a sense. I certainly take them out of my memory. But, with Onana, that's a huge difference in terms of the style of play and, a lot more cohesive in terms of what Ten Hag wants. I think Onana is a transformative signing in that sense. United have got a striker. I don't know how much of an upgrade he is on last season, but I think he is an upgrade on the options that Ten Hag had available last season. Wout Weghorst for the second half of the season. And now Højlund, I feel sure he'll score more than 0 goals in the Premier League.
I hope so.
For 64 million up front and a few add-ons, you'd bloody well hope so. But I think United have had a very good window and maybe not the best of all these clubs that we're looking at. I think I'd probably give it a B. But I think that Ten Hag's getting what he wants, despite all the stuff of the takeover in the background. He's shown absolute ruthlessness. Maguire is on his way to West Ham. De Gea's gone. Last season, Ronaldo went. He's getting exactly what he wants, and the thinking is a lot more joined up. There's a lot more clarity, especially in you look at Chelsea, look at Spurs, look at Liverpool. I think United actually showing a little bit more clarity in their thinking than all 3 of those clubs at the moment. So that can only be a positive. It'll be interesting with Arsenal. United and Arsenal next season. can see it being quite a close fight between the two of them for second. So yeah, that's my thinking.
Good. I like that thinking. It's all cohesive. It makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I do hope I'm wrong. It's one of those ones where you feel like, as a fan, if I think they're going to finish second, then I probably should bring it down a little bit because there's obvious bias. There's obvious bias going into that I just cannot help. But
Yeah,
like
I've
you
been affected
said,
by hubris, but there you go.
yeah, yeah, different sides of the same coin. Yeah, I think Anana will make a huge difference to the way we play. I do think Højlund is an upgrade, obviously on Weghorst. I don't think Højlund is the starting striker for a side that's finishing second in the Premier League. That's my sort of gut feeling on
That's the
that.
nagging doubt, isn't it? But then
Yeah,
United finished third last season without a recognised striker really at all, and with a
yeah,
goalkeeper who didn't play Ten Hag's way at all. So
uh, yeah.
that's what
And then
gives me hope.
I guess my counter argument to that is we didn't quite deserve to finish third. I don't think. I think a couple nice bounces of the ball, bit of luck, maybe got us there. Maybe I'm being harsh on that. I'm looking too far into the data. I don't know. But yeah, look, I mean, if we finish between second and third this season and we're fairly competitive for most of it, and we have a fairly late run into the Champions League, at least getting to the knockouts, I'd be happy. I don't think Ten Hag there should be any conversation of Ten Hag getting the sack if that's what happens. And I think some United fans might drift towards that. I think that would be absolute nonsense.
No, there better not be. That would be completely the opposite of the joined up and cohesive thinking that we're talking about. It's a project, this, and Ten Hag is literally just 1 year into it. You know, it's got to be time. It's got to be patience. It's got to be almost waiting for City to fall on their sword, for Guardiola to go, and then pouncing, making sure you're in the perfect position to swoop and capitalize on that transition that inevitably will take place at some point. I think all United fans are hoping that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I mean, every great team in history of every single sport has at some point stopped being great. It is inevitable.
Yeah.
I think that will happen when Guardiola decides enough's enough. I was hoping that a treble would be enough for him to be like enough's enough, but clearly
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah.
He clearly likes it there because Barcelona got a bit too much for him. Bayern Munich, it was 3 years and then see you later. I need a break. City, they've set it up perfectly, and this is where they deserve credit as well. They've set up the club to be perfect for him. Like people that he's worked with at Barcelona at the higher ups, there's very joined up thinking. The players are buying into it. It really is perfect for him. I just hope that at some point he gets bored or too stressed or something like that, because it is at that point where, yeah, there's an opening, and I hope, and I feel actually that United should be at that point in a very good position to take that up, and that fills me with hope.
Yeah. Yeah. For this season, maybe not. For a future season, let's see. Let's see. So we've gone Man City top. You say Arsenal second. I say United second. Reverse that for third. You've gone Liverpool fourth. And I've gone Chelsea fourth. I've gone Liverpool fifth, and you've gone Chelsea fifth. And then we both said Newcastle sixth and Spurs seventh. Let's write those down, pin them to the wall, and see how wrong we are come May.
Yeah, yeah. Or even like halfway through the season, we have a little review. Use this episode as sort of the episode to have a review of. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is our longest podcast as well. It's that pre-season, excitement has clearly got the best of us, and we've got so much to say about the season that's about to take shape in front of us.
I can't wait. The Women's World Cup is just about keeping me going, but I've been desperate for football. There's been my wife the other day saying like, "Oh, it feels like the Premier League's like barely been away," and I was like, "It feels like it's been forever." It feels like it's been like a year since I've watched like competitive football. So I cannot wait.
Yeah. I noted to myself that I've just got a big new TV and a big new Sky package, and it's just a few days before the Premier League starts. There's no coincidence happening there, I don't think. Even
Are we
if that was
sponsored by
subconscious in my
Sky
head,
or?
I'd bloody hope, I'd
Yeah,
bloody like to be.
yeah, that'd be good,
Well,
mate.
I'll get in touch with them. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much all we've got for time for today's podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me, Alex, and giving your detailed thoughts and predictions.
No, I obviously really enjoyed this one. As much as I love talking about United, it is nice to take a broader view sometimes. So yeah, really enjoyed it.
Great, and we'll be back after the first round of games, and we'll see what happens. Please join us on Name of the Trophy, and keep listening, subscribing, and all that jazz. Thank you very much.